This is Blue Voice, the episode on innovation in the blue economy. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Nicola. Blue Voice is all about spreading awareness about the blue economy in Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. And today we will be speaking with Dr. Shelley-Ann Cox, Oceanpreneur.
Hi Shelley, so there is a question that we like to ask all of our guests, and that question is, what does blue mean to you?
Blue means balance. Balance in terms of personal and family and work, because I work a lot within the marine space. But family being inspired from my granddad, who's a fisher, as well as cousins who dive and spearfish as well. He would have inspired me along the path, but didn't want me just fishing. So I would have gone and studied marine biology, natural resource management. After studying, I was a bit focused on preservation and conservation. But after working in communities of Silver Sands and Concept Bay in Barbados, SEAG related research, they taught me how to free dive. They taught me how to spearfish. I was always on the same boat as well too, maybe more than once a week. And hearing their stories, their local knowledge, and even the things that they do, their norms and practices, I've seen that they're already doing their best in terms of protecting the environment and making sure that the resources that they harvest are available for future generations. Some of the rules on the same boat is like, if you behave bad, you go home for 2 weeks. We view fishermen as, in society, the career is almost, the lowest of lows. And I have great respect for them after working and going out fishing with them. It's something to see. I know a lot of visibility needs to be there on the positive aspects of fishing. And then, the whole entire fisheries value chain. We start from resource management, using data to inform open or closed seasons, for instance, in the SEAG fishery. And the Fisherfolk have been doing surveys since 2001, going into inputs, ice, gear, even looking at the bait. Some bait is imported and quite expensive. And other inputs like boat building, highly skilled things, boat engineers, harvest, and of course, the lady dominated fish vendors that we have in Barbados, which might be different in the Caribbean. And beyond that, the fishing processors are there, the middlemen, persons that export, all of this before the food even gets on your plate. So I really think that we need to raise the awareness of consumers about the value chain, and that it's more than just the fisherman that goes out there, and trying to highlight their role and the fact that they're using a lot of technology now. They're using depth sounders, fish finders, GPS. So fishing isn't just going and throwing a line overboard. It's highly skilled, highly technical. We have guys going out 200 nautical miles or more to get your flying fish. So they're quite skilled. I mean, my first time going out, I think 15 miles, I could not understand how Steve, my fishing buddy, knew how to navigate out there. He would show me, they would take the 3 points and stuff before they had GPS. But imagine that, that skill has been passed on for generations. And even if we look at some of our oldest legislation in 1879, the SEAG Preservation Act, that was all based on local knowledge from Fisherfolk, because the first scientific publication about SEAGs in Barbados was in the 50s. So yeah, why can our forefathers value the local knowledge that fishermen have then? Why aren't we using it more now?
That was, I just learned so much in that one, what you just shared. And off camera, something that we mentioned, I said, I've never heard any young person say, oh, one day I dream to be a fisherman. Yeah. And you mentioned the stereotype around being a fisherman, around that occupation. And everything that you just shared, it just sounds like, why do we have that stereotype about fishermen? Exactly. And is there a structure that's going to be set, be in place, a structure that will be set up to change our view and perception of that particular occupation?
Well, I mean, there are some initiatives, some great partners right now in terms of fishing training programs, annual in terms of what Barnufo and Fisheries Division, Barnufo, the Barbados National Union of Fisherfolk Organizations, and the Fisheries Division, they've been teaching things like safety of life at sea in collaboration with the Coast Guard, as well as navigation. So there are opportunities that might not be known, as well as things like exploring social protection services, trying to get fishermen to contribute to NIS, so they have pensions to cover them when they're there. There's innovation. We talk about innovative type parametric insurances being led by CRIFT, which is the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. So they have been piloting this in Grenada and St. Lucia, but essentially a parametric insurance that is used for countries. So when a country is impacted by disaster and there's a particular amount of rainfall over a certain amount or wind speed, that kind of contributes to the payout. So something similar for Fisherfolk in terms of being affected. And of course something like most of our vessels aren't insured because of course when it comes to claims there's a lot of issues. That's not something we could cover because it's an act of God, and fishers prefer to put the money on his side and use that in case of emergencies. So there's that too. There's disaster risk management and climate resilience part of fisheries too, that we're working on, that I worked on projects relating. There's the sargassum aspect too.
So much.
Yes, there's so much.
Shared,
the ocean's really complex.
Yeah, and you've shared, I think, very well how complex the ocean is and how many actors and individuals are involved in not only the fisheries value chain but the blue economy value chain on a whole. And I think I just wanted to touch, similarly to you, my story is similar. We both came from families that their lives surrounded the sea, grandfathers that fished or spearfished, and that's part of why we're here. And I think a really important point that you touched on and Tracy also brought up was looking at that cultural knowledge and how do we attract youth into the blue economy space and into the fisheries sector. And I think that's where innovation comes in. You started to touch on, some of the technologies that Fisherfolk are using, for example. And at the Accelerator Lab, we define innovation in a few ways. And one of those ways is kind of marrying the old and the new. How do we use that cultural knowledge, which is extremely important, but marry it with this new technology? And that combination of doing things a bit differently is how we define innovation right now within the lab space. So I wanted you to share, if possible, maybe one or two of the solutions that you've been working on or the projects that you've been working on. If you could highlight some of the innovations maybe in your sargassum work or your fisheries work that maybe come to mind, that would be great.
Yeah, so we could talk about sargassum. This year wasn't a big sargassum year, but most people would be familiar that since 2011, sargassum has been taking over 2015 and 2018, my word, in terms of it stacked up on the shorelines. I started work on sargassum in 2017 when I rejoined CERMES. I did a stint at the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, which got me into climate services and marrying that with fisheries and blue economy. But yes, so when I came back to CERMES, I had an idea for a sargassum outlook bulletin using some products. They use remote sensing to try to detect sargassum, and of course there's all the science to try to detect sargassum from other reflected surfaces on the water, but that science is still being improved daily, and collaborating with some really good guys, and actually they're like close to 80, the naval oceanographer at University of Southern Mississippi. But he takes those remote sensing images. He has I call it a fast forward track, but of course it's based on the currents, and we can tell 3 months in advance where the sargassum would come. I mean, we can't say down to the beach because of course there's lots to be improved in terms of the remote sensing, but we can say if it will be, a significant amount if they expect influxes. And the thing is, with me and my interest for science communication too, yes, the forecasting aspect was good, but wanted to try to communicate to fisheries and tourism, especially the two hard hit sectors, what were the implications to them based on that 3-month forecast. And actually, something fantastic, we were just talking to some partners in France, is that they're going to extend the visibility for the remote sensing product towards West Africa. So he may be able to do a 1-year advance forecast. So that's something that I'm working on at CERMES. There's a new SARG ADAPT project as well too. That's my main role there in terms of the production of the Sargassum Outlook Bulletin every 2 months. My co-editor is Professor Hazel Oxen Ford. So yes, that for sure is innovation, and is collaborating with different scientists. But of course, too, we would have engaged the sectors to help them with our framing and tailoring the message to them. So yes, and then we recently produced a sargassum uses guide that looks at the multiplicity of uses, 4 main uses, from agriculture to pharmaceuticals, clothing, shoes. People even looking to develop caskets from sargassum, books, arts, and the marine, of course, the orange economy with the blue economy. And, we would have highlighted a lot of young people doing amazing things. Unfortunately, all of them don't have the backing to make these startups big. And that's something, we can talk about too. But the thing with innovation too is, their training that they need in business development. They have the good ideas, they're focused on developing these innovations, but they need someone to do admin and business development for them and somebody to promote them, So this is something I have a great interest in as well.
That's fantastic.
And then fisheries now, of course, fisheries is my central passion, but working on Blue Digital, which is a UN DP funded the Blue Labs initiative, which I feel really passionate about because COVID has been that catalyst now for innovation and trying to push the Fisherfolk to get online, to use applications. I mean, right now our Fisherfolk in Barbados, they use WhatsApp really well. Lots of Fisherfolk group chats on WhatsApp, and that's a good step. They're using Zoom as well for a lot of meetings. So yeah, little by little we're getting them integrated. I had a chat with some of them about the hesitancy of digital payments as well as online marketing. There's still a sense of hesitancy, but they want to see people do it first before they jump on the bandwagon. So I think it's there, and with Blue Seal, which will be tailored to the hospitality sector in terms of this badge that shows I'm an ocean champion. I'm doing all these sustainable things. I'm sourcing my seafood locally, looking at the species that are most sustainable, like flying fish, dolphin fish, lionfish especially. We could talk all day about lionfish as well. Yeah, it's very delicious. And yes, and then the bluefish aspect of it too, and developing a sustainable seafood guide. There's the slowfish one that we want to build upon, include more species, more awareness around the seafood value chain. And I think it's really important to raise the awareness of the consumers to all the complexities. And of course we want to highlight those best practices. Some Fisherfolk like Gary Marshall, who just won the Molly Award for most outstanding person in the fishing industry, a sustainable chef, a sustainable seafood restaurant, so people could see these are the best practices. What can I do to do that? And I think something that's really powerful is what can you do as an individual.
Shally, thank you so much for sharing a lot of the work that you've been doing in sargassum and fisheries. I think for me, with a similar story to you, was focused on conservation at the beginning of my career, but now have maybe placed a bit more focus on the people, and especially the fisherfolk, the hands that feed us, and the value of this. And I think I was reminded during COVID of the importance and value of fisherfolk. We were caused to rely on them more due to not as many imported products coming in. And I think really following that journey that we touched on earlier, the value chain, and looking at that journey of our food from ocean to plate, and realizing how much goes into that, and how do we place a greater value on our fisherfolk, on our fishermen, fisherwomen, vendors, processors, because they risk their lives. Fisherfolk that go out, over 200 miles, as you said, they risk their lives daily, even if they're just going out a mile. How do we place a greater focus on them and show the average individual that they really are extremely skilled? They are feeding us, they're feeding our nation, they're feeding our region. I just wanted to maybe hear your quick thoughts on that, on the value of fisherfolk. How do we maybe get the average individual to see this value, and how can we better connect and learn more about the journey of our fish from ocean to our plate?
Yes, I think it's programs like this too that raise awareness from the fantastic things that fisherfolk are doing. Festivals too, like Oysters Fish Festival, is a good initiative. But I think too, as an individual, actually visiting the fish market and speaking to some of the fishermen themselves, that they have a wealth of local knowledge. Sometimes they understand the coastal processes better than us that study it for years, just because they've been fishing for 50 years too. But they understand it so well because they break it down and how it affects them. So I think like this, and featuring some of the fishermen that have been involved in science as well too. I mean, I had this passion to, for sea egg fishery, and highlighting the guys that do the surveys. They can do science, they can fish, and hosting the kids more in the markets. I mean, we've started that as well too, but I think the guys too, they have their own ideas about how they can be integrated into school. I know some schools have started some interest in net knitting, as well as some young persons interested in pop making as well too. So I hate to say put it on the syllabus as everybody recommends, but I think there could be a more organic way in trying to weave the skill that fisherfolk have. And then me and the orange economy again too, Kamar Brathwaite inspires me. There's a sea egg poem that I use a lot in my thesis, documenting the tradition of fishing. And I know he explains sea egg diving from the prickly hedgehog. He described it as filling up his lungs with breath to go down diving. He would dive a lot when he was young. And then he even talked about the lady swinging her hips and selling this urchin. So yeah, the arts and the culture and the painting as well too. Of course, they are already featured in a lot of pictures we see around. But yeah, I think that's a way to really
bring them in
more, and highlighting shipwrights. I don't think we do a lot. I mean, I watch some of those guys, and the talent and skill that they have needs to be big up, gassed up, as the young people would say.
Well, I think that is a great point to end on. Let me just say, as a slow food ambassador myself, I'm very excited about the supporting our fishermen, supporting locals, supporting in terms of buying the fish that we should be buying. And I've been learning a lot about that. You can learn about that on Slow Fish. You can Google that and find that very easily, thanks to Nicola and the work that she's done. And as individuals, I think that is the mission. The mission is the support. That's what we have to do. We have to be more connected. We have to be more mindful about what we're eating, be more mindful about what's on our plate, and be more mindful about those who are supporting us to get us there. Both of you mentioned COVID and what it has done. I've seen it in my neighborhood. People are farming. People are using sargassum to make soil and using it in their home farms as well. So you can see it on an individual level. beginning to happen. But Shaliana, thank you so much for joining us today on the innovation episode of Blue Voice. It was really great to have you, and tune in next time for another episode.